Australians are feeling poorer as usual. In the December quarter 2018, taking into account inflation, Australians have lost about $310 billion in household wealth, which is made up of about $170 billion of losses on land and dwellings and $140 billion on financial assets. This is the biggest quarterly fall since 2011 and is the second such fall in 2 consecutive quarters. That is, we're in some sort of per-capita recession. Most of this fall is due to the declining housing market, but a large part of it is due to the 10% fall in the ASX over the December quarter, not to mention household debt. While household wealth has been falling, household debt has been soaring. The household debt-to-income ratio hit a new record, just shy of 200%. Loss of wealth, increased debt, it's an Australian crisis waiting to happen. Naturally, jobs in the housing sector are falling. They fell by over 7% last year. The manufacturing industry is unsurprisingly in free fall. It fell by over 9% year on year. Retail trade's not faring well either, falling by about 3.5%. If you've been seeing lots of small businesses closing down of late, this is probably the reason. Surprisingly, or maybe not, the highest growth in jobs was in public administration and safety. I suppose we need lots more government employees to tell us what we're doing wrong and to make sure that we keep ourselves safe by wearing bicycle helmets, yellow vests, plain packet cigarettes, internet filters, and making sure our kids don't do cartwheels at school, because we all know that doing cartwheels is one of the most dangerous things you can do, right? Right? The Australian Labor Party, if elected, promised to scrap negative gearing by January 1st, 2020. The changes would stop new investors from deducting rental losses from their income tax, raising an estimated $2.9 billion over 4 years. Labor have argued that negative gearing is too generous and is unfair because it makes it harder for young Australians and first home buyers to buy a home. The ALP have also announced that they will reduce taxes for institutional investors that build rental properties. Shadow Treasurer Chris Bowen stated, "This means that eligible build-to-rent investments will pay a 15% tax rate, not the 30% rate proposed by Scott Morrison, which would be double the rate paid for investments in shopping centres and office buildings. It will make a build-to-rent project viable in Australia and provide a tax rate in keeping with the treatment in other countries." With regards to taxes, the RBA has also put their 2 cents in and stated that Australian households are feeling poorer due to increasing personal taxes. They said that over the past year, personal taxes increased at around twice the rate that household incomes did. Households are now paying the highest percentage of their income in taxes since early 2010. Consequently, this may all be weighing on consumer spending growth, which makes up about 60% of Australia's economic activity. The Reserve Bank's Assistant Governor Economic, Lucy Ellis, said, "Income payable, the things deducted from gross income to calculate disposable income, increased by nearly 6% in 2018. This was significantly faster than growth in gross household income. Taxes paid by households increased by around 8%, more than double the rate of growth in gross household income of 3.5%. So basically, the average Australian's tax bill has been growing at a much faster rate than their income has over the past 5 years. With regards to the Australian Tax Office, Dr. Ellis said, "The Tax Office reports that its efforts to raise compliance around work-related deductions have boosted revenue noticeably. The next wave of this effort, focused on deductions related to rental properties, could result in further boosts to revenue." So yes, whether you feel poorer or not, the ATO are keen to get more of your money. Speaking of wealth, data has been released by the ATO that shows the highest income earners from 2017. Unsurprisingly, surgeons topped the list at almost $395,000 per year. Anaesthetists came in second at around $367,000. Third was internal medicine specialists at about $299,000. Fourth on the list was financial dealers at about $261,000, and finishing off the top 5 was psychiatrists at an average yearly income of around $216,000. Towards the bottom of the list were farmers, only averaging around $22,000, forestry or garden worker trainees averaging a touch below $20,000, hospitality employees and apprentices at around $19,000, and the lowest paid profession was fast food cooks, averaging around $18,500. It looks like any job to do with food in Australia isn't paid very well. It's a shame that farmers are paid so little, seeing that everyone in Australia requires food. However, not everyone requires a psychiatrist or a financial planner. One must question how these priorities came about. Australia's poorest postcode is 2308 in New South Wales, which includes Newcastle University and Callaghan, with an average taxable income of only about $20,500. Postcode 4611 in Queensland, covering the areas of marshlands and Mondua, came in second lowest at around $23,000. Victoria's 3482, covering the towns of Watcham, Watcham West, Moreton Plains, Warmer and Massey, were the third lowest, averaging around $24,000. Towards the top of the list, Sydney's 2027, which includes Darling Point, Edgecliff, HMAS Rushcutters, Point Piper, came in third with an average income of around $188,000. Melbourne's 3142 was second, which includes the suburbs of Toorak and Hawkesbury, with an average income of around $194,000. And the richest neighbourhood in Australia was postcode 2108 in Sydney, with an average income of around $230,000. This includes the suburbs of Coasters Retreat, Currawong Beach, Great Mackerel Beach and Palm Beach. Yes, if you're a rich Australian, you live on the beach in Sydney. I told you Australians like beaches, right? Despite all these rich people, Australia has endured its 7th consecutive year of wage stagnation. Average Australians are just not getting meaningful pay rises anymore. The leader of the opposition party, Bill Shorten, has pledged that the next election will be a referendum about wages, and there will be a focus on who the economy should work for. The Reserve Bank Governor, Philip Lowe, has declared a low-wage crisis. Since the mid-1970s, the share of GDP from Australia's labour force has declined by 11%. That is almost perfectly reflected in the increase in corporate profit share, which is up by 10% over the same period. Corporate profit share is now nearing record highs. In Australia, employees have pretty much lost any sense of power in the workplace. Companies are now dictating how high, or low, wages should be, and they are simply not increasing them enough to keep up with the cost of living. Collective bargaining is not quite dead, but it's certainly faltering. Only about 1.3 million private sector workers are covered by a current enterprise agreement. Apparently, private sector EA coverage has collapsed by 40% in just the past 4 years. Workers are losing their power and lack the capacity to bargain collectively for better conditions. Just look at childcare workers. Larger companies have found an efficient way to effectively restructure the system in their favour. They do so by splitting their labour into smaller and smaller components, using franchising, supply chains, labour hire, and most recently, digital platforms in the gig economy such as Uber and Deliveroo. Do you think an Uber driver or a 7-Eleven worker has any ability to negotiate their wages? I doubt it. I'd say their boss is of the opinion, if you don't like it, go find another job. The Centre for Future Work has recently analysed ABS data and found that for the first time in recorded history, a minority of Australian workers enjoy permanent, full-time employment with access to sick leave and holiday pay. They said, insecure forms of work including part-time, casual, temporary, fixed-term, gig work and other contracting now account for a majority of work in the modern labour market. In addition, employees have few laws to allow them to demand better wages by engaging in industrial action. The report said, only industrial action that doesn't have a significant economic impact is usually permitted, begging the question, what's the point? Some employees have been sued and punished for attending protests, wearing union insignia, and even swearing. Under the weight of the currently flawed bargaining and regulatory system, industrial action to support better collective employment conditions has plummeted to historic lows. The poorest employees in Australia no longer have a living wage, but a bare minimum wage, which is barely enough for them to pay the rent and put food on the table. What's going on in Australia? Why are there so many people struggling in a so-called prosperous country? Are we still the lucky country, or is that just an oft-repeated moniker to keep the masses happy? What are your thoughts? Let me know below.